Welcome, welcome. This is Dr. Safiyya Shabazz, your host of the Her Health Matters radio show on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Her Health Matters is the radio show where we discuss all topics around the physical, mental, and social well being of the mature Black woman. This show is full of easy to understand information from wellness experts who will provide us with valuable information and actionable steps to wellness. Let's embrace and celebrate all that is of benefit to a woman's wellness for today's show as we talk about something uh, that's so important and fundamental to health, and that is the influence of nutrition. So, before we get started, it's important to keep in mind that no information provided on this show should be construed as medical advice. Always consult your own physician before making any changes to your health and wellness plan because, of course, I am a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. So make sure you follow up with your own physician before making any changes to your healthcare regimen. This show is produced by Community Hero Action Group, a nonprofit organization whose mission it is to close health and wealth disparities within the Black community. To find out more about Community Hero Action Group, visit communityheropa.org. We have another exciting episode and one that is so important when we're talking about health, so I can't wait to dive in. Let me just explain to you how we're going to roll out the episode for today. We have registered and licensed dietitian, nutritionist Janelle Ketchum from Nutrition Unlimited, who will dispel a lot of myths about what is considered a healthy diet and give us practical, inclusive information on developing a healthy eating plan in our Speak On It segment. We're going to close out the show with our final segment, Let's Take Action, to provide actionable steps outside of just listening to all the great information that you're going to receive during this hour. But it'll also offer events, activities, and outside resources to further empower you to make informed decisions about your health and wellness. Now, an unhealthy diet is one of the leading contributors for chronic disease related morbidity and mortality in Black women living in the United States, according to a study published in the Journal of Racial and Ethnic Health Disparities. I would say not one of, but probably the leading. But this is not a shock to most people. But out of almost 300 participants, the results show that African American women want to eat healthier, but we don't always practice healthy diets. Unhealthy dietary patterns and the associated burden of chronic diseases, morbidity, and mortality are more frequent with African American women. Let's take income as one component. African American women in the United States earn significantly less than men and women of other races and ethnicities, even when they have similar qualifications and occupational status. This disparity in income, of course, influences food choices and increases the subsequent risk of chronic disease, morbidity, or mortality. And we know morbidity means the suffering, and mortality, that means you might be in the morgue. In addition, eating habits in African American women in the United States are significantly influenced by cultural celebrations and rituals that often include eating foods prepared by frying, seasoning with animal fat or excessive amounts of salt, adding refined sugar, and the mindset that abundance is better. So let's speak on it. Let's get right into the things that matter for today's topic on nutrition and inclusivity with today's guest, Janelle Ketchum. Again, she's a registered and licensed dietitian nutritionist, a certified diabetes uh, care educator, as well as the founder of Nutrition Unlimited. With over 18 years of experience in nutrition and diabetes education, working in clinical and outpatient and community settings, Janelle brings a wealth of knowledge that helps empower clients to make choices that move them toward better health. And I know I trust her with my patients when it comes to moving them towards better health. Her specialties are varied and they include diabetes prevention and management, chronic illness management, wellness, and health maintenance. So, welcome, Janelle. Thanks for joining us. And why don't you start out by telling us more about why you started Nutrition Unlimited?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today. So the reason why I started my practice because I worked in the field for a while, a number of years, and what I saw with a lot of my Black patients were a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles with everything from access to food, time to prepare food and meals, and I saw increased numbers of patients that I was seeing that were just being diagnosed with prediabetes, going on to diabetes, and other types of chronic illnesses. And I wanted to really be able to get in there and focus on marginalized populations and, of course, more with the Black community, because definitely at that time, there were not many registered dietitians, even, in private practice, and definitely not many that knew or were focusing on the Black community. So
Mhm.
in my field, like with a lot of other medical fields, there's a very small population or small number of registered dietitian nutritionists that are Black. We have less than 3%. So, just being able to make that connection with the community in our field, it's something, unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. It's also something that that focus is not always taught in school. So
Right.
it's something that, other registered dietitians would have to want to have that specialty. They would have to do their own research because they are not getting that in school. And from what I've seen in my field, it just doesn't happen. So
Right. I
I
think
definitely
even definitely even in the medical field, we don't get a lot of structured nutrition education, even though I know that it's the core of health, but it's not something that there are not a lot of hours spent on that. And I mean, I know, I'm part of the choir in terms of
right.
nutrition and how important it is for your overall health. But what, and I would say it really impacts most health conditions. But what would you say are the top two or three conditions or reasons that people come to see you? And do you think a lot of it is maybe I don't want to ask a leading question because I'm sure some degree of it does relate to what is covered, the types of problems someone can have and have this service covered by the health insurance. But what would you say are some of the top conditions that people come to see you for?
So the top conditions, I would say, as far as them being referred by a medical provider, will probably be diabetes, and then I
Mhm.
would say second to that would be prediabetes. But many people come in on their own for weight management, and they want to
Mhm.
focus on their weight, but they also have diabetes or prediabetes. They have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, vitamin D deficiency, and some of them are aware but don't really want to focus on it or have not focused on it, or or some are just not aware about those other things, or aware that they could use nutrition as a tool to manage those
Mhm.
different chronic illnesses, or even if they don't have one of them, use it to prevent the chronic illness. So I think there's a lot of, especially in the Black community, there's a lot of people don't have the knowledge of how they can use nutrition as a tool for prevention and intervention of chronic illnesses. A lot of people think about it as maybe only weight management focused.
Mhm.
Maybe if they have diabetes, they think, okay, then, they can use it as a tool then, but not for prevention and even to manage other chronic illnesses.
And
So,
that's fascinating to me because a lot of my day is spent negotiating with patients who have clearly not practiced healthy eating habits and many times are suffering the effects of that. And they tell me they don't want medications, and so then I might tell them, well, these are the nutritional changes that might help. Not every certain problems, like not everybody's high blood pressure goes away when they
Right.
improve their nutrition. But it's fascinating to me, you're telling me people aren't coming there for that, but they're telling me they don't want medications, and I'm telling them, okay, well then let's deal with the nutrition, because that's the fundamental thing. So a little bit of cognitive dissonance there.
Right. So I think a lot of people have a lot of hesitation with making changes, and I think there's also maybe some, some stigma as to when they see a registered dietitian or nutritionist, what that will go like. And some
Mhm.
of that is because maybe some people have already seen a dietitian in the past. So maybe they saw one
True.
that, didn't have experience working with Black populations. So they came from a different type of focus that
Right.
wasn't individualized for them, and they felt like it was just very unreachable, the tools or the topics that were covered. So a lot of people have that mindset that, okay, you're going to come in and try to take away everything that I enjoy, and then
Hmm.
leave me with unrealistic suggestions and plans that I know I'm just
Right.
not going to follow through with. So most of the people that I work with, if they've never worked with a registered dietitian before, I would say 90% of them say the session was nothing like what I thought it would be like.
Wow.
Most of them say that.
That is great. I had a funny story from a patient who saw I guess, not as culturally aware uh, dietitian or nutritionist for their diabetes, and they were encouraged to eat sweet potatoes, and they were like befuddled, like, huh? Because that person must not have had any awareness about how most Black people prepare their sweet potatoes. So they were like, what? You want me to eat? I'm like, she wasn't talking about the way you fix it.
Right, right. So sometimes, yeah, you just have to get into the details, and
Hmm.
give options, of course, as to how you can still keep some of those foods, but prepare it differently. And
Right.
yeah, so that's a great thing that you brought up, because that's something that's so easy that can be missed if you don't go into detail.
Hmm.
The way one person would think, okay, I prepare sweet potatoes, eating the skin on it. I
Right.
bake it in the oven with cinnamon. And if you don't even know how someone from another culture, prepares it, then that's a whole
Right.
different.
Exactly. I go through this in my religious community where, we do a million things with the navy bean, and it is a very healthy and nutritious food, but when made into the form of a pie,
Right.
bean pie is not health food. It's not the same as bean soup. It's pie.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yes, having that cultural awareness and getting into the details is really important. Now, there was a study that was published in the American Journal of Public Health, and it inferred that African American women are less likely to participate in weight loss programs and are less likely to have weight loss success. What are your thoughts on this? You told me that most people that come on their own were coming for weight loss. So, yeah, what's the deal?
So that was, I guess, them participating with a particular program, a set program for a number
Hmm.
of months. I will say the biggest challenge for a lot of the, African American Black clients that I work with is time. So a lot
Mm,
of my clients, they either work, maybe they work a number of hours, they may have a second job, they, are caring for a lot of times the only caretaker, maybe for parents and for their families. So a lot of times getting the time off, or the
mm,
flexibility, or having that flexibility with their job to get their time off, is a lot different from their white coworkers. So, or in other fields, I feel like, so having being able to do a set program, if there's not flexibility for the hours as far as evenings or Saturdays, then that is, right there, that takes them out. of, being able to have a program like that. The other thing is, I will say most of the weight management programs that are around are not culturally focused. So
Mm,
they're very generalized. It's not made for, for Black women. So, that's another reason why, maybe some people may see the program and just think, okay, the time, the dedication, the cost, there's also a cost if you have to take time off of work, may not, may not, work for them. So, and then the other thing is, I know there are a number of studies that just show if you get into any kind of diet or plan that is very restrictive,
mm,
it may work for that time when you're on it, but as soon as you get off of it, it does not work. So something else that I see a lot, of course, are a lot of women that have tried different diet plans and they get on it and off of it, on and off. So that's something that I work with everyone on, as to, how can you get on a plan that works for you as an individual?
hmm.
Also, something that is not very rigid, and then also just getting to, a weight that is sustainable for you. It may not be, something on the BMI chart, but it's something that is good for you as an individual, and for your health. So,
Hmm.
I work with individuals to get to a weight that, where they can do their physical activity, they can walk and not be out of breath, they can, be comfortable, with doing their day-to-day activities, and also improve, their health numbers and outcomes also.
Right. You mentioned about really restrictive diets, and I have to admit that I'm sort of an evangelist or proponent of um, a pattern of eating. That's the intermittent fasting pattern of eating, which doesn't have to be as restrictive as it can be, depending on how someone's practicing that. But what are your thoughts on it? I mean, I do try to de-emphasize it as a weight loss plan because I don't really see it so much as a weight loss plan, but I know there are a lot of health benefits associated with it that could, alleviate or improve some of the common chronic conditions that I treat people for. But I just didn't know what's the what's the nutritionist point of view. Do you feel like most people just it's impossible, or if there's a way of doing it that you think is more, reasonable, or what are your thoughts in general?
So my thought on that is that every approach has to be individualized. So I may have 1 in 10, clients that might be able to do intermittent fasting and do that as a way of life, and
Mhm.
the 9 others, they may not be able to do it. So everything has to be an individualized approach. So things that I consider with a lot of the clients that I work with are things like, what kind of work do they do? Are they doing shift work? Because intermittent fasting with shift work is challenging, because some people either, I have some clients where day to day their schedule changes, and they have to work like that for a number of
Which is
years until they
terrible
get
for your
30.
health in general. Yeah.
Exactly. That's terrible for your health, but also not realistic for intermittent fasting, because then you may have to try to switch up every day. When are you going to fast? Because you're getting up at different times of day. So for
Mhm.
someone like that, that intermittent fasting would not work well. It's not sustainable. So it has to be very, very individualized. The studies are there showing, yes, it is beneficial, especially for things like prediabetes and diabetes. But again, if it's not sustainable, then it won't work. So if someone tries it out and they're only able to do it for 1 month or 2 months, and then they get off of it because they can't sustain it, and then people beat themselves up, they feel bad about it, and then they try it again, and then they get into this yo-yo effect, which then makes their weights go up, down, up, down. So
Right.
everything has to be very individualized. I do think that approach can work for some people, but
Like if
that's
they
why.
thought of it like, okay, if you count the time you're sleeping and then like
Exactly.
tack an hour or two on either end, something like that.
I usually say something like maybe 8 to 10 hours, maybe 10 hours. That can work for a lot of people, because, yes, some people, if they have a traditional schedule later at night, they tend to eat things that maybe, they don't really recognize that they're always eating. So
Mhm.
it can work for some people. But again, that approach just has to be very individualized. And that's what really works well with nutrition, a very individualized approach. So even though we have data showing, certain things or certain plans work well for certain
Mhm.
chronic illnesses, sometimes I have to fuse some things or make, certain changes for people. So that's also the benefit of working with a registered dietitian, because we can tailor things and make it individualized, have an individualized approach. And that's what's also different for general weight management programs. It is not individualized. It's one size fits
Right.
all, and
Which
that's
means it
that's not
doesn't fit
reality.
anybody.
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of times they do the research, probably more on, more white communities, what works well for them. It's not centered for even generalized Black community, and much less an individual approach. So most
Hmm.
of the times it just doesn't work.
Now, I know that for myself, even though I'm not a vegetarian, I think it's better if you take meat out of your diet or as much of it as you can. But even though I think a vegetarian diet is great, I see a lot of errors with vegan diets and particularly the raw vegan diets where I'm not sure that that's healthy in the way that people are practicing it. So I guess the question is like, how do you follow a vegetarian diet or vegan diet um, or the specific thing of raw vegan diet and still get adequate nutrition, whether that's protein or, you know, what are your thoughts about the optimal way to practice that?
So when it comes to being a vegetarian, there are definitely many different types of being vegetarian. So I would say many people that are vegan, you're right. You could follow a vegan diet and it could be not very well balanced. You could be eating very low protein. You could be eating fried foods every day, and
Lots of
cholesterol
sugar.
levels can be up. Definitely lots of high sugar intake. So even with that kind of plan, you have to be able to have that balance of protein, the carbohydrates, and then healthy fat also. And that's not always the case. And right now, I don't know if you've seen it with your patients, but vegan foods or vegan meals is very trendy in the Black community, because we have
Right.
several celebrities that are vegan, and of course on their pages they show a lot of different vegan foods that are not always balanced. They don't always have protein. They may have, just more carbs, because they're doing that for social media. They're not, doing this for, they could be eating differently, and it's not for everyone's health for every day. So everyone really, I usually recommend anyone that's switching, of course, from a regular diet to vegan. Always encourage them, definitely have some sessions with a registered dietitian, because many people are at risk for deficiencies. They can be deficient with everything from, their protein intake every day, and B12. Their definitely things like their iron levels, vitamin D, and other things that can get to be very, dangerous for their health. So the
Mhm.
key with that would be balance, and being able to get that balance and having enough protein sources, but also having enough, of course, non-starchy vegetables, and that balance of carbohydrates that works well for you. And then if you layer in chronic illnesses into
Mhm.
that, you may need a different balance than other people. So most people that are following a vegan diet eat majority carbohydrates, high
Mhm.
carbohydrates, maybe about 60% or so, versus, other people, let's say if somebody has diabetes, they may go to 40% carbohydrate.
Mhm.
So, again, it has to be very individualized, but for someone with maybe very high blood sugars, very high A1C, they may need to cut back on the carbohydrates and also increase their fiber. So, having that structure will be ideal for them.
I know I found for myself limiting carbohydrates was really like the most effective thing when I needed to trim down a bit. Um, but do you think that, I've heard some extreme parts of that where some people have said like you really don't need to consume carbohydrates at all, or carbohydrates are bad, or do you think there is some value in limiting carbohydrate intake, or does it matter what type of carbohydrates? What are your thoughts on that?
So I definitely think that eliminating carbohydrates is not sustainable for 99.9% of people
Hmm.
for long term. So most people end up using that as a diet again, that they go on and
Like
off,
keto.
and
Mhm.
exactly like keto, and it just doesn't work well. So for the typical, most people in the typical American eating plan eat much higher amounts of carbohydrates, but they also eat a lot of low fiber carbohydrates. So when
Mm.
you're eating higher fiber carbohydrates, and keep in mind that non-starchy vegetables are also carbohydrates, they tend to be, I would say, the carbohydrates that are consumed the least for many people that I work with. So
Mm.
even just doing something like a switch with that and having a more focus on, increased volume of your vegetables, the non-starchy vegetables. And something I encourage a lot are, a lot of the African heritage non-starchy vegetables, which are really healthy for you. But I have seen in my practice that they are, not eaten every week
What kind
by
of
a lot of
vegetables are
people.
those?
So it's things like, of course, collard greens, okra. I can't tell you how many people tell me that either they've never tried it or they
Okra? I
dislike it.
love okra.
I love it too. And so many people in Philadelphia, I would challenge you to ask your patients this week if they like or eat okra. You will probably be
Right.
surprised to see how many people do not like it. And I'm convinced it's because they haven't had it in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And
A lot of
it's
people say they don't
being
like
part
the texture because
exactly. And
it
they
can
say the
be slimy.
sliminess, but
Hmm.
there's so many different ways that you can make it. But okra
Right.
is a food that can naturally bring down cholesterol levels. It helps with bringing down blood sugar levels. So, those are just some of the different foods, but of course, all of the different greens. And then, of course, a lot of the different beans and peas, limas, black eyed peas, broad beans. They're so healthy for you. But for a lot of people, they're only eating those during holiday times, maybe
Mm.
New Year's, on other special occasions. Not many people are eating those things every week. So those are
Right.
things that I always try to bring everyone back to, eating them a lot more often. And there's a lot of confusion as to, is it healthy or not? Should they stay away from all types of, African heritage food? So that's something I always have to pull everyone back to, because um, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about it, but a lot of times we hear in a lot of different spaces with nutrition, and even when different diets are analyzed, we always see every year the number one diet, the best diet by, certified by registered dietitians and other health providers, is always the Mediterranean diet.
Hmm.
So that's been for a number of years. But what we don't hear is that that is a way of eating. It's
Hmm.
the Mediterranean diet is just a structure of eating. So it's eating more plant-based. You can still
Right.
eat animal-based foods, but you're eating more fish, you're eating chicken ever so often, maybe once a week, and you're eating a
Hmm.
lot more beans, peas, tofu, other things like that for the protein, or your and then maybe some shrimp and other things like that.
Right.
Then you're having
Okay. I because this is important, and I really wanted to highlight that. Why don't we, we're going to dive into that a little bit more. You are listening to WURD 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We're here, if you're just joining us, on the Her Health Matters radio program with Janelle Ketchum from Nutrition Unlimited. She's breaking down nutrition as it pertains to the Black woman, and was just getting into the Mediterranean diet, which is probably the most talked about or probably the most recommended in medical circles. So, Janelle, why don't you just give a couple of just re-summarize what you were just saying, the key elements that one would need to include, because if you're not necessarily accustomed to eating hummus per se, what elements of the Mediterranean diet would could make it culturally appropriate for like the average Black woman?
Yes. So again, the Mediterranean diet is just a way of eating. So there is actually an African heritage diet, which is the Mediterranean diet. It's just made with it. The focus is on African heritage foods. So this
Okay.
includes African American heritage foods, Caribbean, and West African and other Native African foods. And it has an entire plan with recipes. And that plan, it's similar, but what it includes are foods that most Black women are more familiar with. And
Mhm.
that one just has similarly a focus on eating more vegetables, more fruits, also a big focus on using a lot of fresh herbs, which I believe for most people generations ago, this was something that was very traditional in a lot of different Black communities. And this is something that we have to, everyone, I encourage everyone to get back to, because
Mhm.
using things like, whatever it is, fresh basil or fresh oregano, cilantro is another one that I encourage a lot. Those different fresh herbs, and then other things like ginger, um, those different things, they add not just flavor without adding salt, but they also add different nutrients,
Right.
phytochemicals, and other things that are, can fight against different oxidants, oxidation in your system, and fight against
Right.
cancer and other things like that. So it has a focus with that, and then also different fruits that you enjoy. So if you're from the Caribbean, they may put in there passion fruit, papaya,
Mhm.
mango, watermelon. In a traditional Mediterranean diet, you may not see those things. And then you will see things like black eyed peas. You will see red beans. You will see also, things like broad beans. You will see okra. You would see collard greens. You will see mustard
Mhm.
greens and different things like that. And then, for your meat, which is mostly chicken or turkey that you would have maybe once or twice a week, you'll see things like, maybe turkey wings, or, you know, the chicken prepared in, a certain way with using different herbs. And then
Mhm.
also, if you're, for the plant-based proteins, you will again rely more on the beans and peas, or maybe you will season your tofu or your tempeh in certain ways where it's more traditional. So a lot of
Mhm.
times we just hear so much about this Mediterranean diet and these foods, and what most people misunderstand is that those foods, European based foods, are not healthier than foods that come from your culture, from Black
Right.
culture. They are just different foods. So we don't need to eat those foods at all if we don't want it. Um, or you could, mix in, if you do like some of those foods, you can mix in some of those foods. And then,
Mhm.
but also bringing back and having more of the African cultural foods, or African heritage cultural foods, is also very, very nutritious, and it's just
Right.
very under recognized. And then we see a lot of things where, again, there's just a lot of misinformation out there, where people may think that, for example, a big thing that I hear all the time is that a lot of people don't think collard greens are as healthy as kale. I
Mm.
don't know if you hear that a lot, but a lot of people think that kale is superior, because guess why? We hear about kale in that Mediterranean diet all the time.
Okay.
So yes, you can have kale if you like it, but if you don't, you can have collard greens, you can have cabbage and other things,
And
and
I
those.
I think that's the important thing that you're bringing up, because I never really thought about the African heritage diet being the basically like the black version of the Mediterranean diet. Like the components are still there in terms of the types of foods, but the what those specific things are just more culturally relevant and appropriate. Now, I happen to like, actual Mediterranean food and all of those
Right,
Indian Greek type flavors. I do enjoy it, but it's not necessarily something that everybody's palate is
right,
tuned in for, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. So I think that really kind of flips the script on what makes something quote unquote nutritious. And by being more inclusive about what ethnic foods are, and which of these are also nutritious, and maybe it sounds like probably also refocusing on how foods are prepared rather than so much what the foods are. Sometimes it makes a big difference. But I think another thing too is like fruits and vegetables, and we've got all these new labels for things like GMO and organic. And I mean, what is the difference? Is it the same thing? Does it matter? There, I've heard that some things I might be more prone to get organic, and then other things I might not be worried about it so much. But, where would you suggest, like, how can you frame this whole organic versus conventional versus GMO and your thoughts about that from a nutrition standpoint?
So that's definitely a very hot topic right now. So I will break it down a bit. So for GMOs, that is basically just the way that foods are processed or even the way that they are farmed. So, for example, if a farm uses a certain truck or technique to save on time for harvesting their foods, it it may be considered a GMO truck or
Mm.
some sort of robot or whatever it is that they use for that. So even just with that technique, or it could be a watering technique or the
Okay. I
irrigation
thought that
they
meant
use.
genetically modified. So,
No, it does not always mean that. Nope.
okay.
So there's a lot of confusion with that because, and there's been research behind showing that a lot of developed countries have actually been, affected in a negative way with the kind of the a call for no GMOs, because
Mhm.
in places with a lot of drought, they have to use different type of irrigation systems and quicker ways to maybe do things like to harvest and other things like that. And they, due to regulations, are unable to do that. So in those
Mm.
countries now, they have people that are starving, and they're unable to
Wow.
farm and using certain techniques because there is a ban on GMOs. So GMOs does not always mean like a cross breeding or of something. For example, one thing that is a lot of people are confused about are watermelons, and this is something really big in the Black
With the
community.
seedless
The
versus seeded?
seedless watermelon. A lot of people are so against it. And a lot of people tell me, oh, well, that's GMO and I don't like it. Do you know that it is not designated as GMO? It is that cross. There was a cross breeding, from what I understand, from the watermelon board, of two different types of seeds, but that process was not considered GMO. So many of the seedless watermelons, unless they used some other technique with the way that they process it, again, it could be with the harvesting or with their watering irrigation system,
Hmm.
they can put a label on there saying non-GMO, and it's a seedless watermelon. But many people in their minds
Hmm.
will think seedless watermelon is GMO, and that is not the case.
So, but I do think, like, the whole chemical part of it is important, because I've seen a number of studies that the pesticides and how harmful they can be, and even in small amounts that accumulate in the bloodstream and things like that.
And
That's
that is a
that's
whole
the
different
okay.
designation. So that is a difference with organic and non-organic.
Okay.
So something that is organic, that would mean either that farm may use no pesticides at all, or they may use only organic pesticides that are regulated. So there are also farms that are certified organic, and there's
Mhm.
some that just are designated as chemical free, because I've seen that a lot more with the smaller farms, and we have a lot of local smaller farms that maybe can't afford to go through the processing for to be certified organic, but they
Mhm.
are chemical free farms, and they basically are using no chemicals to farm. So that designation is completely different to GMO. So
Okay.
if something is non-GMO, it does not mean that it is organic. It could still mean that they are using chemicals in the farming method and techniques. So that is a completely different designation. And
Okay.
yeah, so that's completely
Like,
different.
I love cotton candy grapes. I don't know when I discovered them, and I was like, "These are so delicious. It tastes just like cotton candy." But then I was assuming it was something genetically modified, but then you could find organic cotton candy grapes. So then I get a little confused, like, what
Right.
exactly is this?
Because something can be possibly, maybe use a GMO method, and then, but it's chemical free.
Mhm.
So again, it's just the farming method, or, that they use. It's not necessarily that they are, doing anything to genetically, speed up the growing process or anything like
Okay.
that. So yeah, so that's completely different. And my take on organic is, it's a little bit double edged, because there are not a lot of studies right now, but although there are organizations that we have in PA that are doing some big research to show or to try to prove that techniques using, and it's not just organic, but organic regenerative, which I'm going to break down that in a little bit.
Hmm.
They're trying to prove that foods grown in that method will have more nutrients than foods that
Hmm.
are not, that are grown conventionally. So right now, there's not a lot of research showing that there are more vitamins or minerals or things like that in things that are grown organic
Right.
regeneratively. The pesticide residue, there's, we're going to see a lot more research on that. But my take on that is, if we can, and this is something that I encourage for all of my clients, if you can get access to more organic foods that are local and maybe get tied into a local farm that provides lower cost organic foods where you can
Hmm.
still eat the volume of produce that is ideal for you to eat, then that's something that I definitely encourage. Or if that's something that works for your budget, because organic foods are going to be more expensive. They're typically double the cost of
Wow.
traditional vegetables and other foods. And that's because there are less organic farms than conventional farms. So it's supply and demand. So
Right.
and then, the methods they use typically are a bit more expensive also. So the thing that I don't like to see with clients that I work with is that now everyone's eating organic, but now you're eating half of the produce.
Not as not
Or
not enough, right. It's better
right,
if you could get everything organic for a cheap price, that would be great,
that would be
but
when,
the next
but that
best
is
thing
not
is to just
right.
eat the vegetables.
Exactly. So you still want to get that volume in. So again, that's where the individualized approach comes, because I sit down with people. I know what their budget is. I can see what their access is like. We are lucky to be in, even though, we're in an urban area, we actually have access to a lot of
Yeah,
different chemical free
local
farms,
foods.
and they're spread out all throughout, the communities from North Philly to the Southwest to, more Germantown, Elkins Park area. We
Right.
have different chemical free smaller farms available. But what I found for a lot of people is that they don't know about them. So that's something that I tie people into a lot. And then something that else that I think is really important for Black communities is getting into, growing your own food. So not
Right,
that,
right.
we're in an urban city, not that I think everyone's going to go out and get land and, grow everything, but if you could join a community garden, or if you have a little deck or a little small patio and you can grow
Right.
your own tomatoes in the summer, every little bit like that helps. And then, there you go. You have your organic tomatoes
Right.
that you
I
have
think
just
it really helps like to build a culture around food too. I really get a lot of um personal satisfaction out of growing things, even if it's just a little bit. I know you mentioned about the herbs. Almost anybody could grow their own herbs, and it takes your cooking to another level. Like your food is going to
exactly.
taste different from other people's food
Yes,
because you have fresh herbs. And that is something I think is like low hanging fruit, to use the produce analogy a little more. But just even growing a little bit of something, it makes me
exactly.
feel like a sense of empowerment that I have the ability to go to the earth and take this seed and grow food. And
Exactly. And it could
I
be done on
think,
a windowsill, and you
right.
don't need any big space.
And especially children, right? Like growing up in the city,
Mhm.
there are children who have more interest in eating a vegetable when they watch it grow. Like this little
Definitely.
tomato seed turned into this plant. And to watch that, I've seen children like the amazement, like, wow, this is what it
Yeah,
looks like for a tomato or cucumber. Like this is where pickles come from. And so yeah, I am a wannabe farmer. I don't go out there when it's cold, but I grew tomatoes this year behind my
wow,
office, and I always try
that's
to have some
wonderful.
herbs going. And in my grand scheme, I'd love to have like a teaching garden and a teaching kitchen. So
I am with you with
we have to
that. Let's
mind
do it
meld on that.
together. Let us do it
Exactly.
together, because I've started the same thing in the back of my office. I have a
Right.
dream to have a teaching garden, and I just started similarly growing things in pots. And eventually I'd like to get some garden beds in there and do a urban garden. So it's more of a
Right.
teaching. And something that I
Yeah.
actually incorporated this year was I started to give my clients starter plants. So even though,
Nice.
not everyone necessarily was able to grow everything all the way, but some people, started, they were able to see what, tomatoes, a tomato plant starting out looks
Right.
like, or pepper plants. And some people successfully planted them in their, wherever it was, in a
Wow.
windowsill or in a little deck or a small yard, leave them in pots. I think that that's a great thing to expand on, and really for the future of healthcare, there's
Right.
a huge future with that. And I think there's so much that we can do
The
with
new
that.
pharmacy, pharmacy with a FAR.
Exactly,
I've seen it
exactly.
that several places before. But what do you think would be like the best thing? Like if you could only choose like a top three list of things to try to grow, what do you think you would recommend in terms of like the most nutritious thing you could grow? That's
I would say, so there are a few things when it comes to ease and and then nutritious. I think collard greens will be number one. I
hmm
feel like it is not very difficult to grow, and you could even, start it in the fall. You could have it outside in a pot, and then it's pretty weather, resistant. And it gives you a good amount of greens with it also. And then if you leave it in there long enough, it can even create seeds. So that would be, I would say, number
nice.
one. And then it's so
Okay.
nutritious, great for lowering cholesterol, that LDL cholesterol, and also, lowering your blood sugars. And then I would say after that, again, thinking a little bit about ease with things, I would say peppers, because I feel like peppers are, again, they're not the most difficult to grow, and they're not the most needy types of plants. And then after that, I would say herbs, because again, you can grow them anywhere and they can add, so much flavor. You can get your different antioxidants and, different nutrients. And that's something that you can also do even throughout the winter, which,
Nice.
a lot of times for the winter, you're so restricted. I have heard of some people doing this, and I am going to actually try it this year. I don't know if you will too. Some people grow things inside and they pollinate it themselves.
Right.
But with the herbs,
I
they
get
grow themselves.
I
So,
I I was looking online and all of a sudden all of my timeline was filled with all kinds of marijuana paraphernalia related
oh,
things. So I think if you start trying to grow things inside, there may be the internet thinks you're trying to grow your own weed.
okay.
And not go to jail. Well,
Right.
you are listening to WURD 96.1 FM, 900 AM. I'm Dr. Safiyya Shabazz, and I'm here with Janelle Ketchum, a registered dietitian, and we are having a great conversation about nutrition. So let's just continue and sort of start to um, get into the um, reasons, like or not the reasons, but like how the implementation part. So let's say someone is going to consult with you for your expertise in nutrition. How how many visits does someone need to have in order to really get a benefit or to start to see a change in their eating habits and their health, or how long does someone need to attempt this before following up to see, okay, did this work or not?
So, well, from what I've seen with both my practice and with research, especially for the first few months, the most ideal to get the best outcomes, but we're always limited, of course, by health insurance, because they
Mhm.
don't always go by, um, research or data. But seeing someone every 2 weeks, I would
Mm.
say, will help the most, especially if someone has chronic illnesses or if they're
Mhm.
working on weight management goals, for, I would say, at least the first 3 months. Something that I have implemented and I've seen very good outcomes with, with my clients with diabetes. I see them, if they have an A1C over 8, I like to see them every 2 weeks until that A1C is under, closer to the 7 mark. And then we
Right.
spread it out a little bit. And I have seen that work so well for most of my clients. All of them that can take that time and dedicate that time
Wow.
for themselves, I would say 99% of them have that A1C down in 3 months. By 6 months, it's at 7 or very close to,
I
7 at
mean, and
that
that's
time.
an investment worth making from, for, at least from
Exactly.
my standpoint as a physician. So every 2 weeks for 3 months, particularly for people that have serious diet related conditions like diabetes. Okay.
Yes.
What about cholesterol?
So for high cholesterol, I would say it's still going to be ideal to do the every 2 weeks, at least for, a month. And then for the very least after that, going to once a month. And even with that, I have seen very good outcomes. And, and I would say the biggest part of what I do that makes a big difference is problem solving. And a lot of people would
Problem
think,
solving.
well, you're a
Okay.
registered dietitian. What are you doing? What do you mean by that? I would say most of the clients that I see have some challenges to their health as to why they have not reached their health goals. Why have
Hmm.
they not been able to eat balanced meals every day? What kind of got them into that rut where, you were eating, fast food every day, you're eating, 5 different types of sweets, you're eating tasty cakes every day. What happened? Is it access to food? Is it the time? Are you working a lot of overtime? Do you have a lot of, do you have some children you're caring for? Do you get no help for grocery shopping and cooking? What is it? So those are things that I think really, really makes my practice stand out to a lot of different ones. I
Hmm.
get in there and I find out what are these obstacles and we work together to solve them. And a lot of times they're not easy to solve because everyone still has to live their everyday life. So sometimes it takes a month to get through one obstacle, and sometimes they're harder decisions to make, or bigger barriers. Sometimes it's some people, for some people they have certain jobs. Let's say they have shift work, or they
Hmm.
have jobs where the shift closes every changes every day, or a bigger aspect of things. And I'm not sure if this is something that you ask your patients that you see about, that you see every day. Bathroom access. I don't know if that's
Mm.
to address, but this is something I address, and I now ask every client that I see for the first session, what is the bathroom access at your job? Because transit employees, some of them do not have good bathroom access. They don't have it for hours at
Wow.
a time. So if I'm telling them, oh, eat 40 grams of fiber a day, drink 64 ounces of water, and drink it all throughout the day, they are going to say, okay,
Wow.
all
You know,
right,
I
but they're
hadn't
not
thought
going
about
to do
that.
it.
It's like access to a bathroom is like a basic human
There we go.
need, especially in a developed country. That didn't even cross my mind that people are not eating vegetables because they don't want to have
Or
to
they're not
move their
drinking water.
bowels.
They're
Yeah,
not
or
drinking
not
water
drinking water.
for hours at a
Well, I know
time.
doctors do that. Don't drink water because you don't have time
There we go
to
too.
be.
So knowing even the type of jobs you have. So if the person is a doctor, if they are a surgeon, so not even just, transit employees, it could be on a professional matter. I work with some judges. They cannot drink water all day because then guess what? If they're going back and forth to the bathroom during a hearing, they're just not going to do it.
Hmm.
So I have to work with them on schedules, timing, scheduled times that they can drink the water. So a lot of times, again, it's that problem solving for that individual, seeing
Right.
them as an individual and what are your challenges, because not everything will work for everyone. So, and
Right.
sometimes just having a plan with that, saying, okay, I want to drink 64 ounces of water. I know I can't do it, 9 to 5. It has to be, maybe from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then maybe later at
Right.
night again from 7 to 9, that type of thing. So it has to be, again, realistic. And that's the same thing too, because, I also look a bit at, some medications,
Right.
with a lot of people with diabetes, but I see a lot of people maybe that are on water pills or they're on metformin, and
Right.
they don't have access to that bathroom.
So
So
then they don't take them.
they're not taking it. And I
Yeah.
ask them all the time, have you told your medical provider about the work you do and that this is not realistic for you? Many,
And
I
they
would
don't.
say 9 out of 10 have never mentioned it, and they're just
Right.
not taking the medication for years because of that.
So this, you brought up so many great points, and it really gives me more insight, even though I work with you as you have helped many of my patients and connected them to community resources and things like that. Are there, it gives us insight about the services that you offer. Are there other services that we might not have touched on that you offer within your practice that people should know about?
Yes. So something that I am really working on right now is not just, of course, coming up with realistic plans for everyone, but letting them actually. We're starting what I'm calling, different nutrition field trips. So we're going to
Mm,
different places, and we've actually started going to some local farms. And actually, next week we will be going to a food forest in the Strawberry Mansion area, and we will be there planting trees and herbs, and again just having all of my clients that are maybe they're interested in gardening, but they've always felt overwhelmed or they felt intimidated by the process of it. What I've started is that we're actually going to be going out to different farms. We are going to be getting experience as a group with actual gardening, doing a little bit of farming, getting tips in, and then I'm also tying in my clients to local resources that they have. So there's actually a food forest in that neighborhood where if you live in the neighborhood, you can go and harvest organic, chemical free food every week for free.
wow.
And most of my clients that live in that neighborhood, they have no idea about it.
Wow.
So,
So, how should someone reach you?
So the best way to reach me, I would say, would be either through my phone number, my website. I am also on social media. They can always DM me on Instagram. It's just Nutrition Unlimited on Instagram. So everyone can also follow me there for a lot of different activities. And even if they wanted to join and come out to that food forest, activity that we will be doing. So then also my phone number, 267-239-5637.
Great. Okay. So that is great. So much rich information. Thank you so much, Janelle Elegant Ketchum of Nutrition Unlimited. Thanks for sitting down with us today and giving us plenty to walk away with so we can immediately develop a better way of eating. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, please visit communityheropa.org/radio. And let's wrap it up. We're going to go into our closing segment, Take Action. I'm going to give you a few action steps that you can take to become more informed, leading a healthy life. And hopefully, you can share this with someone. Don't forget, you want to visit Janelle's website at nutritionunlimitedrd.com to find unlimited ways to get healthy again. If you're close to the Philly area, on October 27th, the Pennsylvania Human Resources Commission is hosting the Crown Act Conference. CROWN stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair, and the Crown Act is a law that would protect individuals from discrimination over natural and protective hairstyles in the workplace, schools, and other institutions. Pennsylvania is currently one of the states where it is not yet a state law. There'll be live educational forums and vendors, and the event is going to be held on October 27, 2022, at the Lowe's Hotel at 1200 Market Street in Philadelphia. As part of Community Hero Action Group's Building the Block initiative, we want members of the Black community to be informed and also engaged, which means voting every 6 months. There's a primary and general election every 6 months, and that next election is coming up. There are policies and laws that directly impact the health and wellness of Black women, well, directly and indirectly. It's important that we have public officials who care about the positive health outcomes of our sisters throughout Pennsylvania. So do your research, vote in your best interest. And remember, the last day to register to vote is October 24th. That's coming up in no time. The last day to request a mail in ballot is November 1st. And of course, November 8th is the next general election. So let's build the block by showing up at the polls. Well, I certainly enjoyed this show and I hope you did too. We've reached the end of our time here at Her Health Matters radio show. I'm your host, Dr. Safiyya Shabazz. Until next time, be healthy, be you, because your health matters. Peace.